So Ashes of Creation in its alpha state has just released on Steam. I've just recently played the game for over 45 hours, and I want to highlight what this game has to offer. But first of all, no, I do not recommend actually buying and investing into this game right now. Many people have walked away disappointed as it didn't live up to their expectations, at least not yet. And it's sure taking a long time before it's actually delivering on its promises. So in this video, I want to highlight my experience. Towards the end of the video, I will highlight my opinions on the current state and what I feel needs to be changed or addressed in order for me to have a much better playing experience. So in terms of content I've played, I hauled resources with a caravan, got attacked by other players, got rewarded for making those deliveries to a very fresh settlement, which is just a bunch of tents right now, but has since been upgraded to the next stage with a few more NPCs. I've mined thousands of rocks, chopped down thousands of trees, gathered a ton of herbs. I managed to tame a load of mounts. There's a huge variety you can just get in game. Processed so many materials, including heroic stuff. And yes, done the usual farming of mobs, including going into a mini dungeon. There's also much more, including turning your caravan into a raft and going across the sea, unlocking all the skills for my class and experimenting, and you can freely respec between them. And there's much more. So let's go through these things in a bit more detail and finally give my opinions on how was the experience. Is the game any good? Starting out in the game, you have a selection of 8 different races, and then you have to select one of the 8 different classes, of which I went with Summoner. Now what's going to have a massive impact on your new player experience is your starter location. I went with Anvils, which is the top section, as this is the newer area, but that means it has a lot less content, a lot less polish. You will see nearly everybody will recommend starting in the Riverlands, which is like the main hub area, and it has a lot more infrastructure and support and guidance for things you can do there. So for me, I had a very bare bones starting point. I was under the mountain, you talk to some NPCs, you kill some enemies, you get given your first mount, and you get introduced to this starting area. And it has support up to level 10 on everything. You get all your starter gear, your professions done in this area. After that, you want to branch out to what are called nodes. These start out as just complete wilderness, and it is required for players to go to those areas, farm mobs, gather materials, and that will contribute XP to that area. Once it levels up to the first stage, it becomes a crossroads. And after that, it progresses to an encampment. And so each of these areas have these stages they go through based on player activity within the area. The most advanced node for our server is now a village rank 3. And this allows it to have some extra buildings that players decide to build, which support further levels of crafting and character development. Now, as a result, you will not find a lot of quest support. You won't have the traditional main storyline that you follow to max level like other MMORPGs. A big part is the nature of the world and how it's just developing. These starter regions are just that. Small starter areas with a few NPCs to support your crafting needs. The world is pretty bare wilderness, and it takes time to develop. If you were to say, come back to the game in a few months, there'll be lots of villages, some towns, and even cities. All of these areas will eventually be upgraded and become larger settlement and player hubs. But this game is not going to be like a traditional MMO where you have loads of NPCs and storylines that can just railroad you to max level. Now with that in mind, there are still some missions that you can do here. These are called commissions. They're little fetch kill quests, and they can net you a little bit more XP. I found there's something you do on the side in addition to what other activities you're doing. If you do want to just grind mobs to slowly level up and get a few gear drops here and there, you can absolutely do that. it can definitely get pretty tedious, and so you may want to do some other things. Additionally, if you don't have friends or you don't want to join a random group, you can still get a ton of XP by gathering and crafting, and that's what I found what took up a lot of my time. I was going for some gear upgrades, figuring out how the whole system works, and so you have all of these different professions that you can do, each of which have levels. You want to get to level 10 to get to the apprentice stage, and that's when you can start crafting higher level stuff. But you won't be able to do so until a node gets to the village stage, which is nowhere near me. And then the players who govern that village have to decide which buildings to actually create and upgrade to support those higher tiers of professions. So the game has a very heavy emphasis on crafting, gathering, and processing. And it is not something you can personally do all by yourself. This game is very heavily dependent on other players. You have a limit on how many different professions you can actually get to max. Right now, I believe it's only 5 on apprentice and then 4 to journeyman. So you will have to rely on other players. A big core thing of the game in general. All of these systems combined together encourage players to work together, to develop a node, to govern and defend that node, to gather and compile resources. One player might specialize in weaponsmithing, another in animal husbandry for mounts, and another for jewel crafting for accessories. Another thing to be very aware of is travel time. If you want to go anywhere, you have to do it on foot or on mount or via the water on a ship. There is no way to fast travel anywhere. And this is by design, and it's highly unlikely to ever change, because a core system of the game is to transport materials from one side of the map to the other. And being able to fast travel would completely ruin that. The reason they also don't have fast travel, say without items or a recall back to your base, is because this is a PvX game, meaning it mixes PvP and PvE. There are a lot of systems in place where players can prevent you from transporting materials, declare war on a node, or simply fight over a world boss. And if players were able to teleport or fast travel between areas, this would create a dynamic where players can very quickly respond to a certain situation. Say, for example, somebody sets out in their caravan on one side of the map. That player gets reported by another player. Everybody hears about it, and then if there's fast travel, they can all teleport there and gank on top of the person with the caravan. That is why there's going to be no fast travel. Additionally, with dungeons, if you're in a dungeon and then a group comes along and says, we're going to take over this dungeon, and they're stronger than you, and they have the PvP force to be able to take over, then they can do so. And if you want to call backup, that's going to take some time because they can't just immediately fast travel in. It creates a dynamic where you're dependent on other players who are around you, and you can't immediately respond to things that happen that are on the other side of the map. So you can't necessarily have a massive Zerg all of a sudden show up and take advantage of lower grouped players. But yeah, it comes with the cost that if you want to be going places, it takes a while. The map is pretty massive, and it's planned to only get bigger. Right now, the map size is about 20 to 30% of the landmass from the planned map here to what we actually have. And that I can confirm in game right here. All these different biomes are right there. I have yet to visit them, but that's just this portion. In the current state of the game, there is a lot of content to be doing. Albeit, it's not exactly going to hold your hand and tell you what you need to do next. You can so very easily get lost in this game and wonder, what am I supposed to be doing next? There is a little bit of a guidance system here, which introduces you to some of these systems, incentivizing you with a little bit of a reward if you go and do this. From combat, adventuring, gathering, processing, etc. But otherwise, it's very much a sandbox. You are left alone in the world of Vera, with all these other randoms, and you gotta pretty much figure it out for yourself. Find out what upgrades you want, find out where bosses spawn, where you can get drops, and there are of course resources online which can help with that too. But that's exactly the point. You're supposed to engage with other players to find out about the world, where you can go, what to do. Combined with this node system, no two servers are going to be exactly the same. It depends what leadership this node has, which buildings they actually develop, and where the hotspots are. For example, a wide majority of players could move all the way to the desert, and this area all of a sudden progresses faster than the other areas, and then they declare siege on the other areas. They fight them and demote those settlements to a lower tier, a lower rank, causing them to not be able to have all the specialized buildings and so on. And again, the economy is driven by the distance that there is between these nodes and the resources that are within them. The travel time that it takes for me to go from Anvils all the way down to Riverlands would be rewarded in terms of resources that I can get only within the Anvils that players in the Riverlands may need. And so there's lots of opportunity for that type of content. Transporting cargo, risking the PvP aspect, and even going out on the seas. This is just a little bit of a barge that you convert your caravan. You can of course get actual proper cargo ships that can transport cargo from different harbors. But again, the world is very much undeveloped, and will take time for our server to get these settlements upgraded to be able to make use of those systems. So after 40 hours of playing, I can say yes, I've enjoyed this game. It can be a lot of fun. But it is very grindy, and it's not going to hold your hand through what to actually do next. It is truly a Sandbox mmorpg. You choose what you want to do. You choose, are you going to be a gatherer? Are you going to be a processor? Are you going to be a crafter? Or are you going to be out there killing mobs, camping boss locations, completing commissions? But since it is such an old school take with all this grinding, I do not feel this is going to be a game that the vast majority will enjoy. The game itself needs a lot of work. These are just some quick improvements off the top of my head that I would like to see in order to make the gameplay feel better. Yes, they could improve the graphics. I'm playing at high quality. I could go up to ultra, but my GPU can't really handle that. In terms of game performance, I haven't found any real issues with it. No crashing, no bad FPS locations, but I'm a person who's used to playing 30 to 60 FPS. You can see my other games here. Ashes of Creation's actually averaging at 57 FPS, and it can't go higher than 60 because I limit these games at 60. So I don't stress out my GPU more than it needs to. I've never found I needed much more than 60. Unless I'm playing an FPS shooter game like Apex, then I run 144 FPS. In terms of other games that I've played, and where perhaps my perspective comes from, there's Throne and Liberty, over 2,500 hours. I played a decent amount of New World, Dune Awakening, Valheim, Enshrouded, and I have over 5,000 hours in my main game Neverwinter, at least that across the 9 classes. And for me, I get a lot of vibes, at least with the gathering and crafting, from Valheim, even the graphics a bit. Although I would very much like to see them improve the atmosphere of the world, like you may find elements in Valheim. The lighting seriously needs fixing ASAP. You get flashbanged every time the sun rises, and when it sets, you get way too dark. But it's not as bad as I had with Chrono Odyssey. In terms of game options, there's quite a few, which allows you to change up the game quite a lot to how you prefer. I just feel they miss overlap between functions. You end up with needing far too many keys to perform basic actions. Like sprint on my mount, I have to use an entirely different key than the sprint I use off the mount. In terms of actually targeting enemies in combat, I find they struggle with issues similar to Throne and Liberty. You still, in most cases, need a key to switch target, like you would do in tab targeting combat, rather than just being able to put the reticle, the center of your screen, on another target and cast your abilities. along with the fact a lot of the time if you're looking at with the middle of your screen the reticle on an allied player and try cast a damage ability, it won't hit the monster, it won't allow you to target the monster that's behind them. So that could definitely be improved, like say Neverwinter or even Ion 2's new action combat system. And then there's issue like Unstuck. The game needs polish, that's for sure. I went off a cliff. I was avoiding fall damage by using my dodge roll, but I ended up falling in a hole, couldn't get out of the hole, and this unstuck function here kills you. And every time you die in this game, it's pretty punishing because they don't want you to abuse the death system for a teleport. So you end up with XP debt, and you also drop half of the materials you had in your inventory. And then there's some crafting issues here, like you seriously need to be able to craft at these stations using materials that are in the inventory of your town. It's like New World, where each town has its own storage place where you can offload materials, and you can't just draw the materials that are in one town while you're in another, again like original New World, and that being because distance is supposed to be valuable. Like moving resources from this town should be a risk if I want to move it all the way here. Giving value to those resources, giving content around transporting those resources, needing other players to protect you transporting them, and always running the risk of running into other players who want to attack you and take those resources. And there's the whole crate system, where if yes, somebody does successfully capture your loot, your resources, that loot is going to be in a crate. And that means if they want to carry these crates and transport these crates with that loot inside, they get a 50% movement speed reduction, even if you're carrying those crates on a mount. So they won't be able to get away from the looted location that quickly, giving time for the people who say died in PvP defending to catch up and retake that loot if they were able to do so. So there's a whole dynamic, and that's supposed to be a big part of the content in this game. Having the nodes, having resources that are unique to certain regions, and they're not being, say, a global auction house or global storage. No teleporting, and so there is huge value in transporting those materials to upgrade nodes for other players to get items and character progress. But ultimately, the game is not done. With the map alone, they only have like 20 to 30% of the content. They're only just getting to a solid foundation with the core systems of the game, like the nodes, and those nodes being able to upgrade with all the crafting, of which there is a ton of crafting. You can look at the big long lists of all the items they already have in the game available to create, and all those materials that those require. So there is plenty of content that they have built up. At this point, moving forward, it's about polishing that and adding new regions to the map, which is most likely a lot easier once they already have a core foundation built. But I would realistically say this game needs another good few years before it can release properly as a full launch. In terms of classes, Summoner that I've been playing feels pretty good. The choice of different abilities is decently diverse. I just would like to have the ability to specialize and upgrade some of these skills a bit more than the limited amount they have. But we're supposed to still get the whole second archetype thing. And that would probably bring what I'm expecting, the way to diversify these skills a lot more. When you have a choice of those 7 other classes to add flavor to your primary class, giving extra effects and abilities. For how combat feels, I think it's pretty good. At least for what I'm playing on Summoner, I haven't played the other classes. It feels pretty solid, impactful. My abilities are useful. I have different combos between those abilities, some synergies. It's not just about spamming everything out. I have 3 different options of summons that I can use, which is really cool. I can have the tank pet, which I use right now, this big golem guy. I could use a more DPS oriented one, and otherwise a healer. And this particularly allows Summoner to diversify and fit into nearly any group. The only thing you don't have is a resurrect that the cleric would have, so you're never really going to replace a true cleric unless they make the archetypes allow you to have that ability later on when you choose a second one. But yeah, overall, I have had no real qualms with the combat system other than the targeting with action mode. That's ultimately it for this video. Hopefully it was somewhat insightful. Again, I do not recommend buying Ashes of Creation right now. That's not to say the game doesn't have potential to drastically improve, to get a ton more polish, but in its current state, it needs work, and a lot of it. Thanks all for watching, and we'll see you guys around.